In this video, we're going to be showing you how to transfer the grid for your object, for your keys, onto your final chipboard, creating the 36 squares. So in the end, all of your squares on your chipboard should be 2 inches by 1.5 inches. We'll first put the grid on your reference photo and then we'll apply it to your chipboard. You'll need a pencil, a ruler, your reference photo, your chipboard. For the sake of saving resources, I'm just going to do it on drawing paper, but it is a 9x12 sheet of drawing paper. And then optional, a pen for drawing on your reference photo. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So if we look back here at my measurements, I need a 2 inch by 1.5 inches rectangle. Because my reference photo here is half the size of my final paper, so my final paper is 9x12. This image here is a 6x4.5. I will also have to divide this number to create my rectangles. So it would be half of 2 divided by 2 is 1, divided by 2 is 0.75, or 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do here is on my reference photo, where it is the 6 inches, I'm going to make a mark at every inch. So 1, 2, 3, 5. I don't need to make a mark at 6 because the edge of my photograph represents the edge of my paper or my chipboard. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side, except I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch, or that 0.75. So if we zoom in to the ruler here, here's 1 inch, here is 3/4 of an inch. It's this longer tick mark right before the 1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my ruler with the edge of my photo, and I'm going to make a mark at that tick mark. Now I'm going to pick up my ruler and I'm going to slide it over, and I'm going to line it up with that first tick mark that I made, and I'm going to go back in that way. Because if I tried to use the 3/4 here before the 2, that is technically an inch between the 2, and we don't want that. We want 3/4 of an inch. So I just pick up, drop my pen, move my ruler, make my mark, move, and make a mark. You should have 5 tick marks here at the edge, because again, the edge of your paper should line up with that 3/4 of an inch, and that would create your 6th box. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to zoom you out, and I'm going to start drawing in my lines. Now, it's important that your lines are completely straight. So what I always like to do is I like to line up my paper with the edge of the table, because I know the table is a straight line. And then I like to also line up my ruler, and as best as I can, make sure that it's lined up evenly with that first mark that I made here. Now, I'm using a pencil to start off with, and I'm just lightly drawing in my lines because I want to make sure that they're correct before I make them too dark and mess up my reference photo here. So honestly, that line looks a little crooked, so we can go in, erase it, and try again. But once you are completely sure that all your lines are accurate and straight and where they need to be, then you can go in with a pen or a marker and start to darken your lines. So that way you can see them a little bit better, especially on the black and gray image. So I'm going to go through and add in my lines here. So now I've got my 36 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. 6 times 6 is 36. We'll go ahead and move on to your chipboard or your final paper. So I said that we divided the number that we needed here for this number. We're gonna go back and multiply that and use that first original number that I brought up, the 2 by 1.5 inches, to draw in our rectangles here on our final paper. So the longer side of my paper, that is where I'm going to put the 2 inches. So I'm going to line up my ruler here, and at every 2 inches, I'm going to make a mark. Now I can draw this these lines a little bit darker than I usually do with my grids because we are keeping this in the final design. And then we're gonna go ahead and move down here to my 9. So now this is where my 1.5 inch is going to go. So I'm going to do this. 1.5, then you add on to it, plus 1.5 is 3, then 4.5, then 6, then 7.5, and then that last 1.5 inches, I don't need to draw in that line because the edge represents the edge of my paper. So now I'm going to go back in, make sure that my paper is straight, make sure my lines are straight, and then I can go in and start to add my lines. All right, so now I have the same amount of squares going across the top and side as I do my reference photo here. One last thing I can do before I start to sketch in my design is I can go in and label this. So I always like to label the top, however many boxes across the top, how many letters. So in that case, it's A through F, and then down the side, label it 1 through 6. Then on my final paper here, I'm going to very lightly draw in same thing because I don't want this to be in my end paper, my end product. But now I have the labels, just easier for me to kind of visualize where each object goes in what box, rather than have to go back in and count everything again. I can just kind of use my labels here to figure out where each object goes. So once you got this, you are good to start transferring your image to your final paper.